My wife offered me an open relationship because I am infertile, instead of taking a child from an orphanage. I sat there, staring at my wife, unable to process what she had just said. Her words hung in the air, sharp and suffocating. We could consider an open relationship, she suggested casually, as if she were offering a solution to a minor household inconvenience. I blinked, confused. My mind reeled back to how we got here, to this point in our lives where the woman I loved thought this was the answer. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I nodded faintly and said, "Let me think about it." But deep down, I knew there wasn't much to think about. We had been trying for a baby for 1 year. At first, we didn't think much of it when Sarah didn't get pregnant. We told ourselves it was normal, that sometimes it just takes time. But by the 6th month, we started tracking ovulation and timing everything with precision. Every negative pregnancy test chipped away at our hope. Sarah's disappointment was visible, but she stayed optimistic, saying it would happen soon. I tried to believe her, but I could see the pressure building. Every month felt like another failure. After a year of trying, we made an appointment with a fertility specialist. The tests were quick but invasive, and the waiting for results was worse than the tests themselves. Finally, we sat in the doctor's office, side by side, as he explained the problem. I was infertile. My sperm count was low, and the ones I had weren't viable. The doctor explained that we could consider donor sperm, adoption, or living without children. His words were clinical, but they hit hard. I looked at Sarah, expecting tears or shock. Instead, she squeezed my hand and smiled faintly. "We'll get through this," she said. Her voice was steady, but something about her reaction felt off. I brushed it aside, thinking she was being strong for me. But now, I'm not sure if that's what it really was. After the diagnosis, I was overwhelmed. I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that I was the reason we couldn't have children. I felt guilt and shame every day. I avoided seeing friends and family because I didn't want to answer questions about when we were planning to start a family. I expected Sarah to feel the same, but she didn't. Instead, she became more active and social. She joined a yoga class, signed up for a book club, and went out with friends more often. Her schedule was suddenly full. She spent more time texting on her phone, and she started coming home late. At first, I thought this was her way of coping. I didn't say anything because I wanted to support her, but over time, her behavior became harder to ignore. She didn't talk about the diagnosis or about any of the options the doctor had mentioned. When I brought up adoption during dinner, she barely reacted. "Let's not rush into anything," she said, as if the topic wasn't important. That conversation stayed with me. It was clear that she wasn't interested in finding a solution. I started to feel like I was the only one holding on to the idea of having a family. She seemed to have already moved on. Her nights out became more frequent. She came home smelling of alcohol, and when I asked if everything was okay, she brushed me off. "I'm fine," she said. "Don't worry about me." But I did worry. I felt like I was losing her, and I didn't know what to do. One night, she came home late and asked me to sit down. Her tone was calm, and she looked serious. "I've been thinking," she said. "We should consider an open relationship." I didn't understand what she was saying. "What do you mean?" I asked. "We could both see other people," she said. "It wouldn't change our relationship. We'd still be together, but we'd have the freedom to explore other things." I stared at her. "You're talking about sleeping with other people?" "Yes," she said. "It's about being realistic. We've been through a lot, and this could help us move forward. It could give us the family we want." I asked if this was about having a child with someone else. She nodded slightly. "That's part of it, but it's also about living a full life. We don't have to limit ourselves." I realized in that moment that she wasn't thinking about our future or a family. She just wanted to be with other men. I sat there, trying to process what Sarah had said. She wasn't suggesting a temporary solution or a way to cope with our infertility. She was giving herself permission to be with other men while keeping me tied to her. "How long have you been thinking about this?" I asked. My voice was flat, but inside, I felt a storm building. "For a while," she admitted. "After we got the diagnosis, I realized we were stuck. I didn't want to bring it up right away because I thought you needed time. But I've thought about it carefully. It makes sense." I looked at her, trying to see if there was any guilt in her expression. There wasn't. She looked at me like she had solved a puzzle, and was expecting me to agree with her logic. "So you want to sleep with other men to have a baby?" I said plainly. She didn't deny it. "It's more than that," she said. "But yes, if we're being honest, having a child this way is an option. It's better than spending years in adoption agencies or going through expensive fertility treatments that might not even work." Her words hit hard. I felt like she had been waiting for this moment, as if the diagnosis had given her an excuse to do what she had wanted all along. "Do you already have someone in mind?" I asked. She hesitated, and that was all the answer I needed. "Who is he?" I asked. My tone didn't change, but I could feel the anger building. "There's no one serious," she said quickly. "It's just an idea. I haven't acted on anything." I didn't believe her. The way she avoided my eyes told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a new idea. She had probably already planned it, maybe even tested the waters with someone. I felt sick. "You don't want an open relationship," I said. "You want permission to cheat without calling it cheating." Her face tightened. "That's not fair," she said. "I'm trying to be honest with you. I could have done this behind your back, but I didn't. I'm giving you a chance to be part of the decision. A decision that only benefits you," I said. "This isn't about us. It's about you doing what you want and making me feel like I have to agree." She exhaled sharply and leaned back in her chair. "I can't be stuck like this forever," she said. "I've sacrificed too much already." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had spent the last year thinking we were a team, working toward the same goal. But now it was clear that she had been thinking only of herself. I stood up. "I need time to think," I said. She didn't stop me as I walked away. I closed the bedroom door behind me and sat on the edge of the bed. The room was silent, but my thoughts were loud. She didn't care about finding a solution together. She had already made up her mind. The next morning, Sarah was already sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. Her eyes were red, and her hair was messy, like she hadn't slept all night. She wiped her face when she saw me, but her tears kept coming. "Please," she whispered. "Can we talk?" I didn't respond right away. I grabbed a cup of coffee and sat across from her, waiting to hear what new excuse she had. "I'm not a bad person," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't want to hurt you." I clenched my jaw. "But you are hurting me, Sarah. You don't get to pretend you're the victim here." She shook her head violently, tears dripping onto the table. "You don't understand what it's been like for me. I've spent a year feeling like a failure. Everywhere I go, people ask when we're having kids. I smile and lie, but inside I'm dying. I see families, babies, mothers, and it feels like a knife in my chest." She wiped her nose with her sleeve and looked at me desperately. "I feel empty, like I'm incomplete." I stared at her unmoved. "And you think sleeping with someone else is going to fix that?" "I don't know what else to do," she cried, her voice breaking. "I've tried to stay strong. I've tried to push through, but I'm exhausted. I can't keep pretending everything is fine. I want a baby, and I want to feel alive again." Her words hit me, but not in the way she intended. I had been suffering too. I had blamed myself for months, wondering if I had ruined her life. But not once had I thought about betraying her to fix it. "You didn't even give us a chance to figure this out together," I said. "You shut me out and made your own plans." She sobbed harder. "Because I knew you wouldn't agree. I knew you'd say no, and I couldn't take it. I thought if I could convince you, we could find a way to make this work without tearing us apart." "This is tearing us apart," I said firmly. "You don't see that?" She lowered her head and whispered. "I didn't want to be the bad guy." I shook my head. "But you are, Sarah. You're making yourself the victim, but I'm the one who's been left in the dark. I'm the one you've abandoned." She reached across the table and grabbed my hand, holding it tightly. "I love you. I really do. I just want to be happy again. I thought this was the only way." I pulled my hand away. "You didn't want a solution. You wanted an escape." Her face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands. "Please don't leave me. I don't want to lose you." I stood up. "Then you should have thought about that before." I left her there, crying. I didn't feel sorry for her anymore. After leaving the house, I drove straight to a park and sat on a bench, staring at nothing in particular. I didn't want to go back home, but I knew I had to. Avoiding the situation wouldn't change anything. When I walked through the door that evening, Sarah was sitting on the couch, waiting for me. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She stood as soon as I entered the room, looking like she had been waiting for this conversation all day. "I've been honest with you," she said quietly. "But you haven't been honest with me. I know you're angry, but you need to admit that this has been hard on you too. You've shut me out, and I've felt like I'm dealing with this alone." I walked over to the armchair and sat down. "You're right. I've been angry. I've blamed myself for everything. But that doesn't justify what you're asking for." She sat down on the couch, keeping some distance between us. "I didn't want to feel alone," she said. "That's why I thought an open relationship would help. It's not just about sex or having a baby. It's about not feeling stuck in this constant cycle of failure." I studied her closely. "But you don't feel stuck anymore, do you? You've already found someone, haven't you?" She flinched. "It's not like that," she whispered. "Then explain it," I said firmly. "If you haven't done anything, why does it feel like this is already over?" She wiped her hands on her pants, a habit I recognized from when she was nervous. "There's someone I've been talking to," she admitted. "But I haven't crossed any lines. We've just been talking." "Talking about what?" She hesitated. "About what it would be like to start over with someone who doesn't have the same limitations," she said softly. The words cut deep. "So I'm a limitation now? That's not what I meant," she said quickly. "But you have to understand I've been struggling. I needed someone who could make me feel like I wasn't broken." I stood up and walked to the window, looking outside at the dark street. "You were never broken, Sarah. I was the one who was supposed to feel that way." I turned around and looked at her. "And I did. But instead of helping me, you found a way out." She started crying again, but this time, I didn't feel the same sympathy. Her tears didn't affect me anymore. "I didn't want to lose you," she said. "I thought this was the only way to save us." "No," I said. "You weren't trying to save us. You were trying to save yourself." Sarah stood up and walked toward me, her hands trembling. "I'm not trying to abandon you," she said. "I still love you. I just didn't know how to fix this without losing myself." "You already lost me," I said, stepping back. "The moment you started planning a life with someone else, you made that decision." She shook her head, sobbing. "It wasn't like that. I wasn't trying to replace you. I just needed someone who understood what I was going through." I crossed my arms, keeping my distance. "You should have come to me. I'm your husband. I would have done anything to help you. But instead, you made plans behind my back." "I was scared," she admitted. "I thought you would shut down the idea right away. And then what? We'd be stuck in this marriage, both miserable, never having the life we wanted." Her words cut deep, but I stayed calm. "So you thought betraying me would fix that?" "It's not betrayal," she said, raising her voice. "I didn't cheat on you. I came to you first because I wanted us to make this decision together." "But you didn't give me a choice, Sarah," I said. "You already decided what you wanted. You just needed me to agree so you wouldn't feel guilty." She wiped her tears, breathing heavily. "I don't want to give up on us. I know this isn't how you imagine things, but we can work through it. We can find a way." I shook my head. "I can't be with someone who sees me as a problem to be fixed." Her face crumpled. "Please don't say that. I didn't mean to hurt you. I interrupted her. "You did hurt me. You've been hurting me for months, and you didn't care. You're only panicking now because you know I'm done." She dropped to the couch, covering her face with her hands. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered between sobs while I stood there, watching her cry. For years I had been the one to comfort her during difficult times. But this time, I felt nothing. "I already made my decision," I said quietly. "I'm done, Sarah." She lifted her head, her eyes filled with desperation. "What about everything we've built? The years we've spent together? You're really going to throw that away?" I took a deep breath. "You threw it away the moment you decided I wasn't enough." I turned and walked toward the bedroom. I needed to start packing. I packed my clothes into a suitcase, moving quietly but quickly. The weight of what had just happened hadn't fully hit me yet, but I knew it would. Sarah stood in the doorway, silently watching me. "This doesn't have to be the end," she said softly. Her voice was barely audible, as if she didn't believe her own words. I didn't respond. I zipped the suitcase and grabbed my phone and keys from the nightstand. As I turned to leave, she stepped closer. Please don't do this, she begged. We can try counseling. We can fix this. I looked her in the eyes. No, we can't. You didn't want to fix it. You wanted a way out. I'm giving you what you wanted. Her tears started again, but I didn't stop walking. I left the bedroom and headed for the front door. The house felt cold, like all the warmth it once held had vanished. When I reached the door, she called out one last time. What am I supposed to do without you? I paused, my hand on the doorknob. You'll figure it out, I said without turning around. You always do. I opened the door and stepped outside. The air was crisp, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that staying would have destroyed me. As I walked toward my car, I heard the door close behind me. There were no more apologies, no more pleas. Just silence. I drove away, leaving behind the life we had built and the woman who had once meant everything to me. It was over.